people as well. My name's Johnny Green. I work for Castle College up in Nottingham, and we're partners with De Montfort in a programme of learning called University Certificate of Professional Development in Commercialisation of the Web. Snappy title. Yeah, I recommend if you're marketing something online, you give it something that's a bit more punch and accessible than that. We are sponsored by the European Social Fund, so we've got some funding from ESF to actually put these events on. So thanks to ESF, I do have to mention it every time and be reminded. So there's going to be a little bit of a spat between Paul and myself. Paul is going to representing. Paul's going to be representing the bespoke approach. I think somebody mentioned you had a handwritten one, a bespoke.
I should have actually worn a bespoke suit, shouldn't I?
Yes, well, it's a bit more bespoke than I'm wearing. Paul's going to represent the bespoke, hand-coded way of going about a content management system. And I'm going to be his foil talking about open source. Does anybody know what open source is? It's easy to get all excited about Google and Google Universal Search and some of the stuff that we've been looking at. Content management systems, I think this is even more important than the Google stuff. Why do I say that? Well, if you can't alter the content on your website, if you can't start to take part in this, the big cliche about Web 2, don't all glaze over at once, but the big cliche about this era of the web is that it's moving from static information websites into what? Some help from the back. What's this next era we're now in? It's not the next era. We're midway through it. Web 2, what's it about? Integration. Participation. Yeah, it's a participative thing. User-generated content. It perhaps should be your customers that are writing the content now, your previous customers informing your future customers. It's about the conversation. Now, how on earth are you going to start to make that happen unless you can start to alter content on your website, unless your users can start to alter it, unless you can start to alter the content on your website? So these days are kind of, I've done my website, I've had it done, and like it's a sort of static thing you can just sort of plonk on one side and it'll just sort of pull in cash endlessly for you. You might find a niche very sort of luckily that does that for you, but you're probably going to have to engage, put some effort into sort of content and publishing and that kind of stuff. And that's where these content management systems come in, because unless you're going to learn all this file transfer protocol and web design and squirting web pages up and down and the web design sort of skills, which are useful skills to have, particularly when you're getting more into the sort of serious side of search engine optimization, that kind of thing. Unless you're going to do all that web design stuff, then you're going to struggle to put content onto your website. You're probably, or possibly, too presumptuous, in a situation at the moment now where you rely on someone else within your business to alter content on the website, or even worse, an external web designer. You give him content or her content, and then sometime in the future, when they get round to it, they stick that stuff on your website. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Exactly, and it's software that's kind of already been written, it's published, it's out there, and you can basically take that code and you can either put it use it in its exact form, or you can modify it to do something a little bit special. So there's a hand code from scratch approach, which I suppose is what Paul's advocating. There's an open source approach, and we're also going to talk about some of the sort of free, cheap and cheerful tools, which might be where you're perhaps more at as a business. You might want to move towards what Paul can offer, but along the way you might want to use WordPress. I mean, not being disparaging about WordPress, but it can get you in the game with a content management system extremely cheaply. Who would challenge me that the web is still growing, and it has done over the last few years? Are we pretty much all in agreement that the web, pretty much whatever metric you use, it's in growth? If we look since 2004, coming into 2008, where the stats are available, this is the total search volume for the phrase web design. And if you ever want to play with this, if you just type Google Trends into Google, it'll come back and allow you to put different phrases in here and see what's exploring. Now, this is an interesting one. Web design over that period, I would say that we're probably looking at possibly a doubling of websites during that period. This was shown to us by one of our techies, Bjorn LaRue, who said, crikey, the techie is finished. Actually, the techie isn't finished, the web designer isn't finished, but we're in a different phase of the web, which is about, people don't necessarily want web design skills because they've now got content management systems. They're now publishing into content management websites, like social media sites like Facebook and things like that, that perhaps using content management systems to alter the content on their own websites. These are some of the biggest sort of open source content management systems. Anybody heard of Joomla and Drupal? Okay, not to worry, we'll have a little sort of chat around those later on, but these are sort of big open source content management systems which you can modify, or more likely you're going to have a web developer modify for you to go on your own website. So we've got our Drupal, we've got WordPress, and we've got what's the red is Joomla, so Joomla, Drupal, WordPress, and then through that we've got kind of web design. So I'm trying to make this case that actually we're in a new phase on the web now. The content is going on the websites in a different way. I think that we are going to do specific events that are about e-commerce, but it's important tonight that we also, as well as talking about content management systems, we also just give you just some sense of the equivalence in e-commerce systems. And we've had various e-commerce systems for quite a long time. Zencart's quite a famous one. OS Commerce was one of the first kind of e-commerce systems that was available as an OS model. And then the big one at the moment is Magenta, which is only launched in 2007, but in that sort of space of time, actually launched in about 2008. In that space of time, is already sort of catching up some of the bigger systems. One of the customers that we've got involved in this is taking part in having their website redeveloped via Magenta. We'll maybe get onto it if we have time at the end. I think the thing that I want to say up front is if you think that, or you've heard that OS is free because the software is free, kind of think again. Tonight is about resourcing this properly, and I think probably one of the points that Paul might touch on later on is this idea of people assume that everything is free online. Open source software, that's free, so I can have it on my website free. Well, you can, but you might have to pay for some skills to have that implemented on your website, or flounder around for about 18 months trying to figure it out yourself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Paul Shaw. As Jonathan says, I've been involved in the internet since 1996, which makes me feel like a granddad, really, with regards to it. We used to go and do presentations, and I remember we sat and tried to order 2 tickets. Shows how old it is. 2 tickets on the Concorde, which no longer flies. We went on to British Airlines, and we went through the process of trying to order 2 tickets, and it came to £6,000. And at the point where we put the credit card, we thought we were going to put the credit card in, it says, please contact us through our normal channels. So at that time they didn't take it very seriously, but we did at the time. The graphs were all going up like this. It's going to be the biggest thing. And in fact, I think I looked at our presentation that we used to do then, and it was off. The graph went that way, and it really went like that. So Right. Content management system, it's not a design management system. The way that I look upon it is it gives you the capability of being able to change the words, the text, the news items, the case studies on your website. What I suggest is you have somebody design your website and then have a content management system that enables you to change the content, not the design. One of the things that we did in the early days, I went to Nottingham City Council and spoke to them about their intranet, and they had every different department had their own intranet. The intranet is just a small version of the net within your own network, and every single department designed every single page slightly differently, and over months and years everything moved away from the corporate look and feel, so they all look slightly differently. And that's one of the problems of having a content management system, that you're allowed to change the design. People will change it, and if you are happy with the design on day one, hopefully you'll be happy with the design all the way through using the content management system. So I don't think it's a good idea to change the design. Let the content person change the design. They should go back to the designer or redesign from scratch again. So looking at websites, this is my view. A website is a brochure site, so it allows you to show information about your organisation, or it's a content managed site, or it's an e-commerce site. They're the way that I define things. Originally, most of the sites that we used to create were brochure sites, and like Johnny says, people would come back to you and say, would you mind putting on this news item, would you mind putting on this case study? The trouble with that is that your site tends to be out of date most of the time. People will go onto your site and say, well, let's see what these people are like. They seem like a good organisation. I met them at a networking event. Let's go on their website, and it says on there, you know, JFK shot yesterday, or somebody did something 2 years ago, or something along those lines. And you think, well, what sort of a company are these if they can't even keep their website up to date? I think it leaves a very bad impression, and I think these days it's even more importantly because of what Johnny was saying also, with your website is being Googled, spidered all the time by Google.
This is an eChampions production on behalf of Access Centre.